Scott, I need to get your take on the debacle in Canada, the international scandal at this point. The Prime Minister of Canada, Justin Trudeau, has walked back any blame for, or has denied any blame for, the celebration of Yaroslav. What was his last name now? Yaroslav Hunka, I believe his name was.
Yeah.
Yes, Yaroslav Hunka. He is former SS Waffen, 14th Division, a 1st Ukrainian Division of the SS. Now, Scott, on Friday, there was a celebration in Parliament after Zelensky's speech, and it was quite clear that Justin Trudeau was not just clapping, and Zelensky was giving the fist pump to this general. Actually, some camera angles looked like he was literally giving the you-know-what signal to Hunka. But also, Anthony Rota, the chairman of Parliament, he has been dismissed. What do you make of this? Give me your opinion, because you've been on this program going over Ukraine's problem with fascists, with Nazis, and now this seems like a pretty big mask-off moment for one of Ukraine's staunchest allies in the collective West. So I'll kick it to you.
Well, I think, first of all, we need to understand that when you speak of the 14th Galatian Division of the Waffen SS, it is a part of Canadian history. I mean, anybody who has studied World War II knows that this division surrendered to the British almost en masse. Instead of being turned over like everybody else to the Soviets to be lined up against the wall and shot as they should have been, they were instead they were sent away to become Canadian residents. So you basically took 14,000 Waffen SS stormtroopers, murderers, rapists, thugs, the most disgusting kind of people in the world. Now, I know there's a lot of they were not. They were just warriors. No, they murdered Jews. They shot them. They bayoneted children. I can't prove that this guy did it, but he was a rifleman. So he probably, shot a few Jewish women himself. Probably enjoyed it too, because that's how those Ukrainians are that join the Waffen SS. They're not innocents. These are ideologically motivated thugs. But now they get to go to Canada and live. But it's not just live. I mean, normally one would think that with your history like this, you'd sort of be hiding from it. Where were you in the war, Grandpa? I was, shoveling manure in Ukraine, something like that. But nope. Monuments go up. The 14th Galatian Division, the greatest guys on the planet, good people, staunch people, total rewrite of history. So let's just start off that when somebody says 14th Division, everybody knows what it is, especially people like Chrystia Freeland, who herself is just a dyed-in-the-wool Nazi. We've talked about it. Little Nazi Girl Scout. Her grandfather was an editor for a Nazi paper. She's been apologizing for him ever since, rewriting his history. So she is scum personified, and so is almost everybody of Ukrainian descent in Canada. They come from that background. Again, I'm not saying that just because you're Ukrainian, you're scum, but I'm saying that if your ancestors were Nazis and you glorify their history and you continue to try and whitewash it, then you're scum too. So now this man shows up in Parliament. Now, I've testified before the Canadian Parliament in the past, and I will tell you that there's a vetting process before you get through the doors. So they know who I am. The security guys have me in their system, etc. And when I testified, it was just to the head of a committee. Now imagine the head of state, not just the head of Canada, but the head of Ukraine coming. The vetting that's done there by the Royal Canadian Mounted Police, by the Canadian Intelligence Services, everybody in there has gone through a process. You have submitted documents. Somebody has looked at the sheet and looked at your name and go, yep, double check. And as you come in, you're screened, metal detectors, the whole thing. So here comes the Nazi coming in. They knew he was a Nazi. They knew he's from the 14th Division. Why? Because this was a scripted event. It wasn't an accident. It wasn't like Justin was applauding Zelensky and he went, oh, look, there's a 98-year-old guy. I wonder where he came from. What did you do in the war, Grandpa? I was with the 14th Division. The 14th Division. Ah! No. The camera knew where to go. They had the whole history done. This was a scripted event. The guy had been cleared. I think you mentioned that his granddaughter posted a photograph showing him waiting. This is ahead of time, waiting to be greeted by Zelensky and Trudeau. So the idea that this was somehow an accident, a mistake, and remember the day it happened on, Yom Kippur. Yom Kippur. So this is a dude from a division to kill Jews, and they're celebrating him on one of the biggest Jewish holidays. This ain't a good look, but it's not an accident. What it shows is either Justin Trudeau is just a dyed-in-the-wool Nazi. I don't believe that. Or the Canadians have become so inured to the potential of Nazis in Ukraine that they've bought into the absolute stupid notion that they're not Nazis. They're just misunderstood Ukrainian nationalists. Then I'm like, come on, guys, cut them a break. It was a tough time. To be a Ukrainian nationalist, you had no choice but to march alongside Hitler. And if he wanted you to kill a couple Jews, I mean, hey, you had to do it in the cause of nationalism because we're Ukrainian nationalists. Our cause comes first. Remember, it was Stepan Bandera himself who said to a Polish courtroom in 1936, when put on charge for murdering a Polish prosecutor, they said, well, what would you do for the Ukrainian nation? He said, I would kill millions of innocent people for the Ukrainian nation. All right, that's Stepan Bandera. The 14th Division is cut from the same piece of cloth. This was no accident. This is a disgrace. And in any normal democracy, Justin Trudeau would be run out of office. Everybody in there would have been run out of office. It would be a day of national shame. But instead, we're told this is just one giant Russian propaganda event. As if the Russians wrote the script. I mean, these Russians are pretty damn good, don't you have to admit, Danny? I mean, because obviously the security guys are going through it. You got Putin going, okay, call now. And the Russian ambassador to Canada, all right, hey, I'm going to distract you while this name goes through here. So you guys, I mean, come on. You really think that Russia did this? Russia had anything to do with this? This is an event that writes itself. Russia didn't script this. It's not Russia that's taking advantage. Poland is. They're going to try and extradite this murderous Nazi war criminal. Again, he's 98, and you're like, give him a break, Scott. No, sorry. There is no statute of limitations on murder. And this is the other thing that gets me. I just don't understand this. I'm not Jewish. I think that should be obvious to everybody. I'm a dyed-in-the-wool Anglo-Saxon. That doesn't mean I have a problem with Jewish people. I don't. I'm not Jewish, though. But I take people's history seriously. And when the Jewish people say, especially after World War II and the Holocaust, never again, I'm like, well, I have to respect that. They mean never again. I mean, and I'm not a master of the English language. I speak Marine, so, I fumble it all over the place. But never again, those are two words that I think I know what the meaning of. And when you put them together, never again, it means it ain't never again going to happen. So why the ADL, the Anti-Defamation League, why the Friends of the Simon Wiesenthal Center, why the Yad Vashem Museum, which has documented the murder of thousands of Jews at the hands of the 14th Division, why these people aren't screaming for Justin Trudeau's head on a platter. I mean, this is the kind of stuff that should bring governments down. Why the Jewish nation globally, the people, aren't up in arms about this, because they too have sold their soul for the cause of Ukraine. They've turned a blind eye. Most of them, not all. There's some people speaking up, but Jews in general, in Canada and the United States, have turned a blind eye to the fact that we are literally allowing this hateful, odious ideology to resurrect itself. And the proof of that is when the Canadian Prime Minister, together with the collective Canadian Parliament, stand up and applaud a Nazi murderous thug from Ukraine that everybody knew was a Nazi murderous thug from Ukraine.
Yes, indeed. And I wanted to actually pull up what you were referencing. So his daughter-in-law, Yaroslav Hunka's daughter-in-law, deleted the photo, and DD Geopolitics was able to capture the screenshot. So there's all kinds of attempts by the collective West as a whole, but especially Justin Trudeau in Canada, to say this was only Anthony Rota's fault. He's resigned now. this was a huge mistake, oops, right? And then if you don't allow Russia to get one, you're only spreading Russian propaganda if you point out our wrongdoing here. But here is the big problem. By saying that not only did they celebrate this out-and-out fascist, but they are also attempting to pull the wool over our eyes and say it was some kind of error. But yet here is Teresa Hunka, his daughter-in-law, with a screenshot, very excited. She says, Dado is waiting in the reception hall for Trudeau and Zelensky. He obviously met with Trudeau and Zelensky before the parliament meeting even began. So they obviously knew that he was going to speak, and they knew that he was going to be celebrated. And to think that Rhoda is some lone wolf here is absolutely ridiculous. But Scott, if you could react to this, but not only this, could you tell viewers this long-standing problem Canada and the collective West have had with Ukraine and with this Nazi problem, with this fascism problem? Because this is something that we've been pointing out. And when Putin says denazification, it's, oh, that's a lie. That's not right. That's not actually what Russia is doing. And here you have someone being celebrated for fighting against the Russians during, the only war where that would be possible, World War II. And the only side that was fighting against the Russians during World War II was the side of fascism. Your thoughts?
Well, I just want to start off by pointing that thanks to that photograph, we now know that he wasn't just in the same room with Trudeau and Zelensky. He physically met them. And anybody out there with a security background or has dealt with, meeting heads of state, you don't get that close unless you've been thoroughly vetted, inside, outside, upside down. So they knew who he was meeting. They knew what they were talking about. This is not an accident. This was done on purpose. And for some reason, they thought that this would be a ho-hum thing because, after all he's guilty of is fighting the Russians. No, he's not guilty of that. Look, one of the problems with Ukrainian nationalism is that it's a very convoluted history. Where do you start? But what we can say is that the end of World War I was sloppy. Between the Brusilov offensive and then the Kerensky offensive, the Treaty of Brest-Litovsk, which created this Ukrainian Republic, German occupation, empowering them, breathing life into this notion of Ukrainian nationalism. Where do you draw the lines? You have the Polish-Soviet War, where Red Army troops are driving to Warsaw, the Poles kick them back, they drive to Kiev, they have to stop, and then you get this artificial line drawn on a map that sort of splits the Galatian population, which is an intermixed population of Polish people and Western Ukrainians. And then you have people like Petulia, the early Ukrainian nationalist, coming in. He sets the tone for Bandera rising up through the ranks. Fighting, because Bandera operated on Polish soil, not Russian Ukrainian soil. But Ukrainian nationalism was born actually in the Galatian region of Poland. Then the Second World War starts. The resentment that the Ukrainian nationalists had towards the Poles and the Polish Jews in particular manifested itself. One only has to take a look at the rape of Lvov that took place in July of 1941, where Bandera's troops ran through that city, slaughtering thousands of Jews. The photographs of that, it was well documented, and the photographs will turn your stomach. I think everybody should see them, but don't do it on an empty stomach. I think these are things that have to be seen to understand it. If you look in the eyes of the boys chasing down the naked, half-naked Jewish girl that they're getting ready to rape and beat to death, she's already bloodied in the face. Her clothes have been torn off. And you look at the eyes, it's a wolf. It's a pack of wolves going in for the kill. And it's important to see that because this 98-year-old guy was a young guy. during that time. And I can guarantee you that his eyes looked that way too. He was chasing down the Jewish girls and raping them and killing them because that's what they did. But the Ukrainian nationalists organized their own units. They carried out horrific crimes on their own, but they also organized into actual German combat units. And one of these units was the 14th Division, the Galician Division of the Waffen SS. They did fight, they were involved in combat, but they were also involved in a lot of police actions, going up against partisans and suppressing civilian opposition. And they were very effective at hunting down Jews. 1944 is a very good year for them. They went out and in Hungary and elsewhere, they went down and just slaughtered Jews. And when I say slaughter, this isn't indifference. This is a task that they took pleasure in because the Jews are subhuman. It's the same thing. They take pleasure in killing Poles and killing Russians because they view themselves as the Aryan super race along there with the Germans. At the end of the war, this division, like I said, was surrendered, and rather than be turned over, though, because what happened at the end of the war is, if you remember Winston, if you remember, as if we're that old, but studying your history, you'll see that Winston Churchill had a huge problem with the Soviets, and especially the rapid expansion of the Soviet army, the Red Army, out of Russian or Soviet territory into Eastern Europe, especially in Poland. And there was a lot of resentment on the part of Winston Churchill. So early on, even as early as 1944, Winston Churchill, as the special operations executive of British intelligence, start to run Polish nationalists and Ukrainian nationalists against the Red Army. And they're actually killing Red Army soldiers. If you go and look at the exchanges between Stalin and Churchill and the Soviets and the British leading up to Yalta and Potsdam, you'll see that Stalin is saying, you guys want me to support this certain Polish dude, but you're funding him. We know this, to kill Red Army, and we've lost Red Army soldiers for this. And I can't support this because there's the blood of Poland has been liberated with the blood of the Red Army, and I can't support somebody who's actively trying to kill Red Army soldiers and is killing them. So the British, from the earliest times, had an issue with this, with the Soviet Union, and so they automatically aligned with. And the British have a history of doing this. They can hold their nose against the stench. They align with people. They believe in the friend. What is it? The enemy of my enemy is my friend. And so, so the 14th Division surrenders, and the British take it over. Despite the fact that the Soviets are saying, we want them to come here. These guys have committed huge atrocities and we need to hold them to account. Nope, they ship them out. Now, they had a history when the Banderists, Stepan Bandera, the organization of Ukrainian nationalists, those kids are running around Lvov raping and beating up women, then they turn around and beat up everybody. When they were being kicked out, about 30 to 40,000 fighters and about 200,000 supporters remained in Western Ukraine. But about 150 to 200,000 fled with Stepan Bandera, with the Germans, back to Germany, back to Berlin. And then when Berlin fell, these people went over to the West and they became what they called displaced persons, DPs, but not Bandera and not his harshest people, because one of the Germans that fled with him was a guy named Galen, a German general. He ran the intelligence operations in the East, and he organized the Banderists into stay-behind units to carry out intelligence operations, reconnaissance, sabotage, etc. And so he was controlling them. And when he was captured, now the Americans were going up against the wall. Bam! We're going to kill you because you're a Nazi scum pig. And he went, yeah, but I control a network of tens of thousands of people. And the Americans went, really? Well, welcome to the club, boy. Come on in. All's forgiven. Bring in your entire organization, all your little Nazi intelligence thugs. Bring them in, and we'll just wash you, cleanse you with holy water, and you now work for us. Originally, it was the OSS, the Office of Strategic Services, and then it became, in 47, the CIA. And so we were using the Banderas and Ukrainian nationalists to communicate with the Banderas that are in Ukraine. So all this is going on. Meanwhile, you got 14,000 Galatian soldiers, and we go, what do we do with them? Well, the Brits said, off to Canada you go. And so they shipped that unit off. They shipped a whole bunch of these Ukrainians from these DP camps throughout in West Germany, or occupied Germany. They shipped them to the United Kingdom, to the United States, to Canada, to Australia. They just dispersed them, and they reinforced an existing Western Ukrainian diaspora of people who had fled, after the First World War. They were sort of normal people, but now these fanatics come in and they take over. You can read books about, especially in Canada, how these OUN guys came in, the Organization of Ukrainian Nationalists came in, and they just took over through intimidation. They just came in and said, no, we're in charge. We're the ones who will define what Ukrainian national is. We're going to rewrite the history so that everybody looks great. And that's what we're doing. And Canada bought it. This is where you get Chrystia Freeland. She comes from this revisionist approach. This is why in Ellenville, New York, we can have monuments to Stepan Bandera. And people go, well, he's just a Ukrainian nationalist. No, he's a murderous, rapist thug. So is, Shukevich, Roman Shukevich next to him, and the other two. So that's what's happened. Here's the important thing. While these people are being settled in and these diasporas are there, the CIA is running covert operations into Eastern Poland, Western Ukraine, using this organization. And the way the CIA works, I'm not going to give away too many secrets tonight, but they use diasporas. I mean, that's what they do, because the diasporas maintain
clear. Yeah.
Yeah. And so they will contact the diasporas and they'll open up, communication chains, and then they gather intelligence, and then they train their own little team. They parachute them in, and they parachuted a lot of guys in. They all got captured, because the one thing you can say is, even though Galen had was thinking he was running this organization, the Soviets had infiltrated it and were getting good feedback. But there was some bloody fighting going on from 1944. Because remember, the Red Army took over a lot of this territory in 44, even though the war didn't end until 45. From 44 until, say, 53, 54, so 10-year period. The Red Army and the internal security forces lost about 40 to 50,000 guys in combat, 10 years. It took us 10 years in Vietnam to lose 58,000. And people remember there's some heavy fighting in Vietnam. So it was a serious war. Understand the scope and scale of the fighting then that's taking place in Ukraine during this period of time. It's not minor. It's a big deal. Guys hanging out in the woods, running in, slaughtering villages. They killed hundreds of thousands of civilians during this time. Eventually, the Red Army got the upper hand, and around 54, they suppressed this. They arrested a bunch of people. Another 100,000 or so Ukrainian nationalists flee, going into the diaspora, further infecting the mindset of these people. The others, about 100, 200,000, go to the Gulag, where they're locked up, and the key's going to be thrown away, because the Soviets, go back and read the history of the time, they hate the Banderists. They view them as literally the scum of the earth. They know what they are. They've seen them butchered. So many people died in Western Ukraine during the Nazi occupation. Other people fled, that there was nobody to teach. There was nobody to run the education. So the Soviet government brought in Eastern Ukrainians, Russians, ethnic Russians, in to man the schools and do all this. What did the Banderas do? Killed them all. 100,000 of them. 100,000 of them. They killed them. So now they're locked away. 1956, Nikita Khrushchev, because Stalin kicked off a couple years earlier. Khrushchev holds his secret speech. And basically, it's denouncing Stalin in the Stalinist period, and it's trying to expose the sins. It's an effort to, heal the Soviet people. So he denounces Stalin, and one of his acts was to open up the Gulag and free the political prisoners. So all of the worst people in the world, the Bandera scum that had been arrested, locked up, were now released, and they were allowed to come back into Ukraine and reintegrate into society. And you can say, okay, Scott, but it's not that bad, is it? Well, yes, because remember, the CIA is running the diaspora organization. They're funding it, and they're making connectivity, and there's a collusion between the Nazis and diaspora, the Nazis that were just released from the Gulag, to work their way back up into Ukrainian society. And up they go, all funded by the CIA. The CIA funded this operation up until 1990. In 1990, the decision was made that we no longer needed to fund this because it was sort of on automatic mode and relations are getting good and we don't need to be doing this whole regime change thing again. But it's not that it's just that the CIA backed away. We continued to do the funding, but we used other monies to do this, etc. But this is the thing. This is the norm where in the United States, in Canada, and Great Britain, the Western Ukrainians in diaspora have rewritten their history and published book after book, magazine. One of the Chrystia Freeland's gravest sins is what she did with her grandfather. He was an editor of a newspaper in Krakow that was loyal to the organization Ukrainian Nationalists and the Nazis. And his paper was a pure propaganda piece that actually facilitated the deaths of Jews, encouraged these things, etc. He came over as part of the diaspora, a part of the wave of immigrants, and integrated in. And she started writing about him later on, and it just total whitewash. He didn't do anything wrong. This was difficult times. That's their whole thing. It was a difficult time. Yeah, but difficult time doesn't justify the murder of Jews, the murder of Poles, the murder of Russians. It ain't a difficult time unless you're the guy doing the murdering. Now we got you. But Canada gives them all a clean bill of health. The United States, nobody questions this. And today, if you dare question this, if you dare raise the facts, you're called a Russian propagandist.
Yeah,
you're called a tool of Putin. But no, we know what the truth is. But what we've done is allow our hatred of Putin and Russia, this Russophobia that's infected society, to blind us to the fact that there are Nazis among us today. Just this summer, there were 2 iterations of the youth camp here in Ellenville, New York. I've seen the photographs, and they're lined up wearing their brown little Nazi uniforms, holding their portraits of Stepan Bandera with their little banners on which are Nazi symbology. Now, well, it's not really Nazi symbology. Yes, it is. That's where they got it from the Nazis, and they've incorporated it as their own. These are sick people, but that illness infects not just Ukraine, but everything around us. Anybody who, I'll put it this way, here's a direct challenge. Anybody who has a Ukrainian flag on their social media, you're a Nazi supporter. You're the scum of the earth. Want to know why? Because you're too stupid to do the research into why you think you support Ukraine. And if you think I'm wrong, I will debate you anywhere, anytime on this issue, because I will crush you, because I have the facts. You don't. And you're stupid because you put the Ukrainian flag up there and you don't know why you do it. Or if you do know why you do it, then you really are a Nazi supporter.
Indeed. And then maybe to tie a bow on this too, journalist Aramate of the Gray Zone, he tweeted in reference to some of these more maybe Zionist-oriented Jewish organizations that have said something. I don't think they have gone hard on the issue of, hey, the entire Canadian government is probably doing a pretty bad thing here by celebrating this guy. Also, this is not just a Canadian problem, it's the entire collective West. But Aramate posed the question. He was like, well, why is it so infuriating to celebrate this guy, but there's not that same outrage for the fact that these forces are being funded and armed in this conflict right now by Canada, by the United States, by the rest of the NATO countries. So, I think it really is a reflection of not just the historic problem that you have spoken so well on, but also the reality right now in Ukraine, that every time we bring it up, we're just repeating Putin's lie that Russia is denazifying Ukraine.
What kills me is in 2018, the U.S. Congress voted in favor of an amendment to the National Defense Authorization Act, which was allocating monies to Ukraine to train the Ukrainian armed forces. And that amendment clearly said that U.S. taxpayer dollars cannot be used to fund the Azov Battalion. Why? Well, don't ask me, ask Congress, because they wrote it in the amendment. Because the Azov Battalion is a white supremacist neo-Nazi organization. And a lot of fine Congress members from both parties signed on to this, primarily Democrats, though. but they signed on to it, and because they said there's a Nazi problem in Ukraine and we don't want to fund it. Now, in 2022, Marjorie Taylor Greene, I know I hear all the boos and the hisses right now. Okay. But she stood up and she said, why are we sending U.S. taxpayer money to fund Nazis in Ukraine? And she was just shouted down by Jamie Raskin and all these other wonderful Jewish Democratic guys, all of whom supported that amendment, voted in favor of that amendment because there were Nazis in Ukraine. But now they're saying, this is Russian propaganda. There are no Nazis in Ukraine. I mean, they're not even trying to at least show how they, had a come to Jesus moment. They went, oh my God, there are no Nazis in Ukraine. I was wrong the whole time. Nope. One moment, you can't spend U.S. taxpayer dollars because there's Nazi. The next moment, oh, wait a minute, Nazis have become convenient. There are no Nazis. It shows you the intellectual and moral shallowness of these lawmakers because they stand for nothing, literally. They stand for nothing. And they're damn sure not Americans. And I'll say that right to them. Jamie Raskin, you're a traitor son of a you-know-what. And I hope and pray someday they find you guilty of treason and you go to jail for the rest of your life because you had betrayed your country. You betrayed the memory of my uncle. Okay, my uncle who went across Normandy 6 days afterwards, but he went across the beach, worked his way up through France, got into Belgium, got ambushed by the Germans. The 88s opened up, took out his company, killed 250 guys in an instant. They're buried in Luxembourg Cemetery. I've visited the graves with him as he weeps for the loss of his friends. This was in the cause of defeating Nazi Germany. And now we have members of Congress today who lie about there being Nazis in Ukraine, saying there are none. And then they turn around. Remember, the same people that said you can't spend money on Azov in September 2022 invite Azov into the people's house, into Congress. They praise them. Nancy Pelosi says Slava Ukraina as if it's a good thing. Nancy, read your history. In the OUN handbook, the actual handbook, when you join the OUN back in 1943, the handbook sits there and talks about the slogans and why you say it. You say glory to the heroes. You say, glory to Ukraine, and then how to give the salute and all this stuff. 100% Nazi affiliated. And Nancy Pelosi's Slava Ukraina. I mean, she's an idiot. Thank God she's done. But everybody stood there. She should have been fired at that moment. All of Congress should. She held up a banner signed by Nazis. I mean, this is... My blood pressure is probably going to go up and I'm going to die of a heart attack before your show is done, but it will be in a good cause because we need to educate people on this. This isn't an accident, ladies and gentlemen. This isn't a lack of understanding. This is deliberate. It was done deliberately in the Canadian Parliament. I'm telling you right now, they knew they had a Nazi in their midst, but they chose to whitewash it because that's in vogue right now. And it's done in the U.S. Congress. They let these Azov thugs hold to do an auction for memorabilia, and they're selling the patches from the Azov uniform with the damn Nazi symbols on them. And they're in Congress, the American Congress, they raised $30,000 for a good cause. Good cause. Same cause that had that 90-year-old man 70 years ago jam a bayonet into a pregnant Jewish woman's belly.